With large portions of the population practicing social distancing and self-isolation, it is common to witness scenes of wild animals reclaiming their space. Seems to me that not a single day passes without news of mountain goats taking over the lands of a small Welsh town, or dolphins swimming through the waters of Venice once more. But if the Pentagon is to be believed, our less polluted, airplane-free skies are now the home of not only more birds than ever, but maybe even a few extra occupants. This is Clapfoot After Dark.
I guess I'm supposed to switch. I wish we had like a better like transition out where it was like this cool transition out. But since
I know,
just...
that's what I'm saying. Like, we put the stinger in and then play some music and do an animation and shit.
But since I'm
It'd be
switching
really good.
cameras in Discord, I'm not actually using it. Discord sucks. Anyway, Discord's great. How are you guys doing today?
Not too bad. How about you guys? What is up with the world of quarantines?
It's going good. Getting a little stir crazy, you mean?
I think all of us are.
I, like many other people on the planet right now, have been desperately trying to figure out ways to like bake, and I've been trying to cultivate my own little colony of yeast. And let me tell you, yeast does not like me. It has been very up and down, and I do not know what I'm doing wrong. I feel like
up and down.
Seems like that became, for some reason, not even just baking, but sourdough in specific became the default quarantine activity for like everybody. It is so weird to me. I don't get it.
It's because it takes a lot of kind of time.
But there are other things that take a lot of time as well.
Well, because people are like getting into like baking and cooking. It's like, for me, I was thinking about this recently, and I think it's like I talked about it last week. It's like I can get away from a screen, and I can get my hands kind of into something that's really sort of like basic. It's not like technical. It is technical, kind of, but it's not the same kind of technical. I don't know. There's something about it that's like extremely relaxing. Like, I was in a really bad mood yesterday, and then I had to make, and then I made dinner, and I made all this stuff, and it was just, I don't know, it was really, really, I felt so good afterwards. I don't know what it is. I honestly don't. I even fucked something up like miserably, and still it didn't bother me. I feel like it's just maybe it's just like cathartic for certain people, including myself. So that's my best guess.
Yeah, I've been cooking. Well, because of everything that is happening, of course, I've been cooking a lot as well. Not particularly sourdough. I don't see the appeal of that, but just regular cooking. Although there has been a very significant increase on the bread production in my house ever since the quarantine started. So it is a thing that is happening.
Exactly.
I heard that laugh in the background.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing though. So, and if it was a bad thing, I would not say live to thousands and thousands of people that are watching us right now.
Yeah, we're not doing any cooking over here, but we are gardening. We started planting kale, hopefully, and basil. She reminds me.
Oh, basil nice. Is good. Kale is great, but basil is
Kale's not. Let's get this out of the way. Kale's not great. There's no good situation to use kale.
You chop kale like thin, and then you just like kind of like stir fry it with like onions and garlic and just a little bit of olive oil and some salt. Mwah.
Yep. So we just throw it into like our spaghetti. Like when you're just boiling spaghetti, just throw it in there, and like as you're eating spaghetti, you're also eating kale, and you don't taste because it's like covered in sauce.
I don't know about that one. I gotta be honest, but
kale is like. I get lettuce. I don't like lettuce, but I get lettuce. I love spinach.
You get it. I get it.
I don't get kale. It's a bitter, like shitty leafy plant. I've never. That's
why you have to do with like, so like the trick is you put like when you're cooking it, you put some rum or some vodka or some alcohol base, or if you have cooking wine, like a Chinese cooking wine, which is like alcohol. There's some alcohol content. And it's cooking wine.
No, there's like just a Chinese name for it. I can't remember what it is.
I have no idea what is the Chinese name for it. I wouldn't even try to. But you cook with that, and so a little bit of salt, oh man, it's so good. I don't like bitter things. You know me. I actually hate bitter things. But when you cook it like that, it's pretty good. And then of course you make it like you make that as a side dish to like a roast, like a salted roast or something like that. Oh, mwah, so good.
Anyway, so I hope you enjoy your kale. I'm very excited
I
to
will.
report in like a month when you might actually have something to report.
How long does it take kale to produce?
That's a great question, and when I have the answer for you, I will let you know.
Oh man.
I also have a pear tree, and we have an apple tree. But this pear tree is huge on my property, and we both don't eat pears. So we're gonna end up like every year we end up with all these pears that just end up like having to give
Make
them
compotes out of it. Pears are great for you to make sweets out of it. They're so good.
Ooh.
Yeah, you can put it in a compote, or you can like make a pear dipped in wine, and then you put some pastry around. It's really good. It's really good.
Nice.
So that is something you can do if you don't like pears as they are. But
yeah, they just I don't know what it is. Just never.
but think about it. You'll be eating the pear, but also have the wine. So
Aha! For some wine pairing.
Yeah.
That
That hurts so bad.
That's two. That's two today. And we've only been live for like 4 minutes or something.
Yeah, it's but I've been cooking. I've been cooking a lot more. I've been trying to like. The beauty about Brazilian food is that since we have very little access to a lot of shit, we have to make do with what you have. So it's very, flexible. So I've been doing a lot of Brazilian cooking, like Brazilian style cooking, and I gotta tell you, it's pretty good. Spent like
you know what?
2 days ago, I spent a whole day making like black beans. The whole day making black beans, like preparing that black beans.
Dried beans that you like had to
Were
like
dried,
hydrate and stuff. Yeah.
Rehydrate, and then I kid you not, after they were already rehydrated for almost like 10 hours, I spent 2 hours cooking like the beans and making like slowly simmer, and I make farofa. I made some meat. Oh, it was so good. It was delicious.
Speaking of which, you'll have to send me a recipe for pau de queijo.
Oh, I have to.
I want to make it.
Yeah, or cheese balls.
Yeah.
Brazilian cheese balls.
Something that HB used to always bring to like parties or to like when we were in school. He would just bring it randomly. And it was always really good.
It's kind of like a very traditional Brazilian thing. And if you haven't tasted a Brazilian ball, Brazilian cheese balls, it's really good. It's delicious. But yeah, other than that, other than cooking,
it sounds like we're all. It sounds like there's a lot of food going.
That's because this is the only thing that is happening inside our houses that is different and new. But apparently, the world is going crazy outside of our houses, including people that are coming to check out on us.
People?
We don't know if it's people. We know it might be something, or it might be just people, and we're just getting it confused.
$100. It's experimental technology that Elon Musk has developed and is doing testing it illegally.
I don't know if I think you might lose the bet on the Elon Musk part of it, but I mean, I'll take that bet as being.
Elon Musk doesn't seem like a guy who gives a fuck about.
No, he's like, okay, here's my rocket. Yeah. So for the people that don't know what the fuck we're talking about, the Pentagon declassified 3 videos.
Do you have the videos handy?
I have it. 1 second.
Yeah. So there are 3 videos that were declassified of unidentified flying objects that pilots got locked video of. It's actually pretty cool, and they don't know what it is, and the military didn't know what it was, and they moved at velocities and accelerations that were impossible based on the circumstances they were in, and they don't just look like birds or something. It's very, very strange, but they're actually.
It is very, very strange. So here's the thing: the way these videos have been out in the public for a while now. I'm gonna turn on screen sharing here. These videos have been the quality of it is kind of like potato anyway, so you don't have like it doesn't matter if you're not. So these videos, they have been out in the public for a while now. They leaked a long time ago, That's the name of the video, Go Fast. But the thing is, they were always like unconfirmed sightings, basically. And these are classified as unidentified objects. People still don't know. But this is the first time, the subtitles are what people are saying. This is the first time in which the Pentagon actually release videos of UFOs, of unclassified flying objects, right? And they only did it. You can actually read the reasoning behind that. They only did it because they were already in the public, like they had already been released to the public. So their idea was that, like, well, we want to make sure that we want to confirm that these are real videos. We still don't know what they are. They might be just be, as you said, experimental aircrafts, which is very likely, but they are confirmed videos, and people don't know what they are.
They were classified at one point in order to be declassified.
Yeah.
So.
And this happened like 2 days ago, right? Like 3 days ago.
I believe so. Anyway, what do you think, Max?
Yep.
You're the space guy of the three of us, so I'm curious to get your opinion.
Well, I tend to subscribe to the general prevailing theory that they run these test flights out of like secured installations. So when they're doing their training, these pilots don't necessarily have a high level of classification clearance. So they just go out on their normal training runs, and then they spot something very unusual and they film it. Now, obviously, like if you put yourself in the position of like a cadet, like you see something strange and your superior officer doesn't know what it is. So naturally you want to investigate it, but maybe this was just an experimental aircraft that's just above both of their pay grades. And what is that guy going to tell them? Like he's just going to be like, well, don't ask, don't. And that definitely breeds this curiosity. Everybody wants to know what this really is about, when what it might really just be is some experimental aircraft or something of that nature. But what I don't know, for me personally, God, I hope so.
That would be really cool.
I hope it's aliens. But I mean, come on.
Cool.
I mean,
the best thing.
It's interesting that they were once classified and that are declassified. And I'm not saying that it's interesting that they were classified. It's interesting that they were declassified. Because to me, that says these were reported, like you were saying, that it says these were reported as unidentified flying objects. So then that file, that information would have been classified, even though they got leaked or whatever. That information would have been classified because it needed to be investigated. It has probably now been investigated,
found to be
bullshit.
Just a
it's
testing
it's something that cannot be announced.
Yeah.
So they're like, fuck it. Like, these videos are out. Let's just say, here you go. It's not actually anything, so there's no harm to the public.
The real question, though, is what's the reasoning? Because, like, the reasoning for the classifying, like, they gave a reasoning, but it seems like a weird reasoning, in my opinion. Like, we have other videos that have been leaked before of unidentified objects, and why even bother? You know what I mean? That's the only weird part, in my opinion. Is like, why even bother to do all this? I agree with you guys that, like, most likely that these videos, they were just filming something they were not supposed to be filming because they're cadets or whatever, and because of that they got classified, they got investigated and found out that shouldn't be for anybody's eye. And to the point of that is that the only thing that got declassified were the videos themselves, not the files attached to it, not the actually investigation. But what is the reasoning behind like releasing that right now in the middle of this pandemic going on? Is it just to create some buzz? Like it makes kind of weird. Like I'm not one for conspiracy. I don't like conspiracy. I think that there's always usually like I'm a very big fan of Occam's razor. The easiest, clearest explanation is usually the correct one. It is
they
all
just
weird.
they just want to distract from the conversation of coronavirus and give us all something else to talk.
It
And
didn't
don't
work.
get me wrong, I totally believe in aliens. Like I am 100% sure that like aliens exist. I just don't think that they are flying objects above us. And if they are, I really don't think that they are, because I don't think they even know our existence. Like the timelines don't coincide. But let's say by a miracle they fucking are. Like there's no way we can just like catch them on a crappy camera.
I mean,
It makes no sense.
there's a lot of conspiracy theories. Actually, we should have an episode one day on conspiracy theories because
Isn't this the one? Because I think this is the one
This
that
is
is
the
the
one.
if this is the one, let's just deep dive because I love conspiracy theories, but I fucking hate them because
I
I
hate
can't
them and
believe
love them.
I can't believe that people like believe in them, but I love them because it's like crazy sci-fi shit. But the thing that always bothers me about UFOs is that there's an image that is in people's brains from like all those like old sci-fi movies like Encounters of the Third Kind or whatever, and like some of those early sci-fi movies of like the fucking discs and things that move erratically, and every single time someone reports a UFO it is in the image
Of
of those
course.
things. And it's the same when people report being abducted by aliens. It's in the image of the things that are familiar.
Yeah,
The
the
Gray Men,
light
the
and the
Men in Black,
yeah.
all of those things. And that always puts to like, why would they be even remotely close to the things that have been dreamed up by human minds? It doesn't
Because they're
make
not.
sense because they're not.
Obviously.
But there's a conspiracy theory of these. They're called like tubes. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's a tube theory.
That's news to me.
I'll see if I can find some images, but basically they're let me see.
I'm sure that this tubes theory hold as much light as the string theory. We have the string theory and tubes theory, same thing, right?
Now I'm deeply interested. I've never heard of this before.
And I like conspiracy theories because like just as much as the next guy. It's just I don't believe in any of them, but I love and trying. What I really like is trying to understand what generates it. Like what is the motivation? Like you have the craziest things like the flat earthers and shit like that. It's like what makes you believe in them? What makes you really go out of like completely the realm of everything that we know of?
Okay.
And what are your arguments? And why can you ignore? Why is it? How is it so easy for you to ignore 99.99% of everything else that is out there? But you latch onto that one thing.
Well, I actually have a theory about that, which I'll talk about. But so these tube aliens, I can't find anything because it's probably not the term that's used. It's probably something else. I haven't actually dug into this in a while. But basically, there's these long, sort of translucent, bio-illuminated creatures that kind of exist in our planet, sort of among everything. And sometimes there are people will take photos and these sort of, they're almost like long fucking like dragonfly like things, but they're kind of translucent, and they sometimes show up in photos, and it's not like a trick of the light. You can tell the difference between like a trick of the light and like these things, but I don't know what they are. They're probably just some animal, but because they've been seen at sizes of like skyscraper sized to like the size of a dragonfly in different sort of situations. There's a whole like episode of some like crazy TV show about this. I found that kind of fascinating because I was like, if there are aliens, it's going to be more like that. They're going to be something that we can't quite like wrap our head around. Probably, it's probably a creature that isn't Earth like, because why would it be Earth like?
So like interdimensional beings kind of thing.
Or just like there are another set of circumstances or elements that breed life that we are unaware of, which is likely more the case than
just look at the creatures that live in completely different environments than ours, like are the very, very depths of the ocean, or like extremophiles in general. They don't look like anything that we know of because evolution doesn't work that way. Why would evolution always bring up humanoid forms? Like, makes no sense. I agree. I 100% agree. I would love to see an alien. That's why one of my favorite movies is Arrival, because it's
Mhm.
like it completely deconstructs what it would be, like creates like an alien that has like not only. I think a lot about that, like if aliens exist, they probably don't communicate in any way, shape, or form, even near what we do.
Yeah.
They might not understand the concept of sound.
Yeah, they
Like
may not speak with like vibration like we
if
do.
their atmosphere does not is not conducive to that, they might just like, I don't know, communicate with fucking light or whatever. It could be like many different ways. That's why Arrival is such a great movie, right?
Yeah, I think Arrival is one of my favorite sci-fi movies because it does tackle the alien uh, creature in a way that is sort of like strange. It was even hard to wrap your head around that movie, which is at first,
Mm-hmm.
which is like really interesting. Um, but to talk about conspiracy theories, I got really like into flat earthers because I think they're really funny.
I love the flat earthers.
Um,
It's one of my favorite ones, by far.
there's
Why did you get? How did you get into it, man?
um I just listened to a podcast that had like a flat earther on, and I was everything he was saying was so absurd. It was nonsense, and it's like instead of like they don't know what's like they're like you just believe what you're told, and if you're told a thing then you just believe it. I gotta prove it to myself, so I'll do these scientific experiments, think about this, and then they'll like just lay something out, but it's like, well, if you just actually know how like physics work, that doesn't make sense. But it's like they ignore like the laws of physics to sort of back their own point, right?
But that's exactly what the thing that I enjoy the most about
Hmm.
conspiracy theories in general is like the steps that you have to make, and it's like you have this theory that is so absurd that anything before that would easily disprove it, but then because of the whole concept of it, and like we mentioned, like, oh, there's a reason why people like get more and more into the deep end of them, and like part of it is that like when you don't believe on something, then you also don't believe on authority, on
Yeah.
any arguments of authority, and you start thinking that any argument is an argument of authority if it comes from a scientist, because the scientist is an authority on that field, right? So anything that it regards science can be disbelieved, and if that disbelief, most likely equivalent to disproof. So you don't believe any of that. You don't believe the proofs. You don't believe any uh, how do you say? I forgot the word. You don't believe any signs of that being true. Therefore, you have to start questioning more and more fundamental things until you get to the point that you're like, yeah, you don't believe you believe in gravity, you don't, or not anymore, or things being circle. It goes so deep down that when something comes up that fulfill that void, oh, here's why you're. And the other thing is that you always have that. The way I see is like these people like always have that knack that maybe they're being lied to for any reasons, and it's okay to not trust blindly your government, for instance. I think that's very healthy. But like if you already have that inkling, it's very easy for you to not trust anything that it says, and then you're like, well, anything that they say, they're just furthering their agenda. Might make no sense whatsoever. It's just like a domino effect, it just go deconstructing more and more. So no matter what you say like, oh, you make the argument that there's no direct flights from United States to fucking Australia or something like that, like, which is an argument that flat earthers do use
Yeah.
to say like there's no direct flights between United States and Australia, because if the earth was flat, that would not be the closest, the shortest path. But then you say, well, actually, you prove to them that there are. Like, here, I can show you. These are, you can buy a ticket for a direct flight. And they're like, no, 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 no. Nobody actually take that flight. This is just part of the conspiracy.
Yeah.
These are fake flights.
Part of the conspiracy.
Yeah,
But you can
because,
see plane trackers with flights going to Australia the
but
opposite
doesn't
direction.
matter
It's like
because the government controls the GPS, so they can make the coordinates of where it shows in the globe because it's the government, they have like they change what the actual location of the plane is. So like there's this whole like you have to make more convoluted plots, but people don't like to be wrong, right? People don't like to feel like they don't know something. And I
I
think
think
that
that's
it's
where it
all
really
about
comes.
being I think it's all about being in control, you know? Like you don't yeah.
I think that's where it really comes from, is that people don't really like to be wrong. And I think that like when you like I remember a time when I was very young, and I used to think that, the world was as big as I could see it, right? Like I didn't understand that there was cities beyond my own, and I couldn't comprehend that. And then I read this book about like a girl who was living in this dystopian future, and she would be gassed every time she left the city. So like she's like, well, when do you ever notice when you go on long car rides that you fall asleep? And that's because they're reordering everything so that when you wake up, it's like you're actually still in the same place, it just looks different, which is like ridiculous to assume. But like I could see it where somebody with maybe takes a little bit longer to get to that conclusion. Maybe they get into an argument with their friend or with their teacher about like, oh no, this is definitely how it is, and they try to disprove that point to them, and then they get defensive about it. And when you get defensive about it, you start looking for ways to prove your point. You stop listening to the rational arguments. You start looking for the ones that support your idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that just evolving over years and years of people just wanting to be right, and until you reach these like ridiculous conclusions that make no contextual sense to somebody from the outside, like
Mm-hmm.
the earth is flat.
I know yeah, I think you're right. It's I mean it's and I think that the reality is that not only people don't want to be wrong, not only people want to be in control, but I think there is a lot of it is people don't want to feel like they are meaningless. You know what I mean? I think the way I see it is that like I've been in a very depressive almost like binge of like philosophy tube and looking and a lot about like the science that is being developed throughout during this quarantine time because right now everything is meaningless and life sucks. But and the thing is that like I saw like just by coincidence I saw the other day I was watching a video. It was like, oh, the things that happen the next second. And like it's like apparently in the next in one every second 5 or 6 new stars are born. Like so like that's so insane to think that like a star like a sun is created in every second, like or more way more than one. So when you start actually looking into like what actually is the world and the universe, and not only that, like even the government, how can you make a difference? You start feeling insignificant, completely insignificant. So if you create these elaborate stories about like aliens are coming to beam me up, I was kidnapped by aliens, so I have this experience. Even if they are if subconsciously they feel like they are the protagonists of this story that it is like human existence instead of just being a fucking background character. I guess that one guy that got killed by Voldemort. Voldemort only killed like a couple people. So you know what I mean? Like I think that there is all about that. About it's all about power, like feeling like you're in power, feeling like you're in control. That's how you fall into deep. Because if you are the few like dozen people on the whole globe that actually know the truth that the Earth is flat, or that the moon landing was fake, or that aliens are among us, you are special. You know the truth. You are in the small selective group. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah,
that's
so
what it actually.
so that's what I was gonna get to. Is you got to it, but is that they feel special. They feel like they are the protagonists of a sci-fi movie, and they know the secret truth. It's like the Da Vinci Code. There's only one guy who figures all this shit out, and that there is a conspiracy. And these people are a protagonist in that in the film of their mind, basically. And what's really interesting about that is they also build a community around it. So not only do you have this idea that you are somehow special, you are somehow chosen, and other people are sheep and they can't see it, right? But there's also the community aspect. You are part of a bigger thing. You now have
Mhm.
friends. You now have maybe lovers. You now have social group that you speak to on a daily basis. You can't just, even if you
You
disagree.
belong.
Sorry.
Suddenly you
You
belong.
suddenly you belong to something, and you can't, even if you disagree with something, even if you're like, nah, well, this argument actually makes some sense, you can't just say that, because then your community is done, and you no longer have that. You might be ousted. You might be you might not belong anymore.
Uh-huh.
And especially people who have made a living off of this, because they do. There are people who write books. There are people who have YouTube channels, and so it proliferates. It's a crazy thing that now that things are sort of easy to spread information, people find somewhere that they belong, and I think that's why conspiracy theories like this get so big.
I think that
There's a new
we are.
show
Sorry,
on
go on.
Net. There's a
Go
new show
on.
on Netflix right now called Waco. It's like 7 episodes long, and it's really good. Even if you're not into cop dramas, I'm not, but it was so good. The drama is excellent, the writing is fantastic, and the acting. But it's about that exact thing. It's about the FBI trying to talk down a fanatical religious community
Mhm.
into coming out. And the context of this situation is that this religious community is perfectly peaceful. They're just like a polygamist, like isolationist kind of group of people,
Mhm.
but they believe in some pretty wild stuff. But they're totally peaceful, totally not breaking any laws. And then the FBI comes in for political reasons and it's really interesting to see how like the police will try to convince them of one thing and how they like their beliefs are reinforced by almost directly by what the FBI is doing. So, for example, he might suggest the religious group leader might suggest that they're going to come under attack for their beliefs. It was written in the Bible, and then of course the police have to come in to root them out, and
Do that.
that's like
That's
which is
proof.
only reinforcing what they believe. it's it's a really fascinating show. I really highlight.
That's another. I think that's another important point. Is that like every time that you have something that tries to dissuade or deal with the narrative, no matter what the narrative in this case that you're describing is a religious narrative, right? You can, particularly the leaders, can take that and reframe that situation into something that fits what they already believe. In this case, they're like, "Oh, see, it fits the text. It fits these holy texts that we follow." Or if somebody comes to them and say, "Oh, no, 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 here's an image from the like a live fucking feed of the ISS," uh, it's like, no, this is made on Unity, and it's just this is the government trying even more, going to all the lengths that they have to protect the truth that I know, right? I think you're absolutely right. I never even heard about this show, but I'll check it out.
It's
Seems like way up my alley.
it's like 2 years old, but I think it's the first time it's appeared in Canada. It's definitely
Mm.
something I want to watch. I find cults really really interesting. If you if you read about for research for a story, I did a whole bunch of research into uh the Jonestown cult,
Mm-hmm.
and cults are really really fascinating because it is in a way a government,
Mm-hmm.
uh and in a way we buy
Depends
into,
on the
like,
country.
sorry.
Depends on the country, though.
I mean, a cult in itself is sort of like its own government,
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah, you're right.
and in a way, it's like, as Canadian citizens, we're born into, like think about it this way, right? You're not a Canadian citizen, I suppose,
Canadian
quite yet.
citizens.
But as Canadian citizens, we're born into, and maybe you can even speak to this because you're not a Canadian citizen. We're born into a culture that has operated a certain way, kind of for quite forever. for a very
Mhm.
long time, and we buy into these ideals because that's what our parents bought into, and that's what they believe, and that's what they preach. And in a weird way, a lot of the time we don't really question it, especially when you're young or impressionable. You just don't question it. You accept certain things, and our country operates so differently from other countries, especially our neighbors.
Mhm.
In the U.S., we are so fundamentally different in terms of how we approach politics, in terms of how we approach, um, social aid is a really good example. And to us, we're like, you know, um, everybody needs healthcare. What are you talking about? But in the U.S., it's a debate, it's a
Mhm.
topic. But to us, it's like that's inconceivable. Like we can't. It's like, how do you have it? And it's true to almost every Canadian that I know. And I think that's just a microcosm of what can happen in a cult. It's just we believe things different than other people, and it is
Mhm.
its own sort of government. People like to congregate around ideas, and that is just human nature. We are tribal by nature, and so we find our tribe. Even if we disagree, then we find our sub tribes. And so I think people who like conspiracy theories, like Penn and Teller's bullshit, is a show that is
Oh, it's
really really
fantastic
good,
show.
but
Yeah.
but it can be a little hit or miss. Like they're not, it's for entertainment value more than anything. But the episode that they have on like alien abduction is like, whew, it's like really really crazy to see how people will the shit that people will say just to feel like they belong.
Yeah,
Um,
I think what you said that like the well, you said that Canada is a microcosmos. I think it's a macrocosmos of the microcosmos that is the conspiracy theories groups and things like that. You're correct. I absolutely agree. I can see that you're right from coming from a country that has different values, absolutely different values. I had a different mentality, right? I think I mentioned to you, Matt, a couple of times that like the small, what we call nowadays microaggressions of the everyday life, right? How you could jokingly say, oh, this is so gay, and we just assume that the word gay is derogatory, for instance, right? It's something that in Canada is like it's obvious. Like, why is that derogatory? Like, what about that is derogatory in and on itself? Just because a person is a homosexual, right? For instance, in Brazil, that concept doesn't even come nearby, right? Like just it's assumed that it's normal. So you're right. We are we are a product of our circumstances. I happen to have changed my circumstances a lot because of a lot of luck of being born where I was born, with my parents allowing me to do that and all that. And I came to Canada, and it opened my mind a lot as well to what I think is a much better way, much more progressive way. I think it's something that these kind of things that never even occurred to me as a human being, how much it could be just like affecting somebody else with like everyday speak, right? And I'm like, well, why the fuck am I saying this kind of things if I don't have to, like just for flavor? But is it
yeah,
even good? Is it even bad?
just because you're
You
trying
know,
to express something. Yet, yet,
exactly.
yet,
Like
yet, there are people who maybe that,
I'm
words
trying to make
words have
fun of
power.
you as a friend, right?
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm trying to make fun of you as a friend, like friendly banter. So why did I choose that word? What about that word in particular is funny or not, or derogatory or not? Like it's ridiculous after you think about it. But you have to. It's interesting because to a lot of people, it's not. And I live that. I 100% live that. Like that the difference between one country to another. And I think that's one of the beauty of internet in general, but I think a like globalized world as a whole, is that it's much easier for you to find a society in which you fit in, either a macro society or a micro society.
hmm
In my case, my macro society, Canada, I think I fit in much more with the Canadian values and ideologies than I fit in with the Brazilians. I identify much more with Canadian values and concepts than I identify with Brazilian ones nowadays, but like by far. And micro, well, I don't want to get into all the things that I like, but like, oh, the people that are crafters that do like things with their hands, or people that like anime and are unashamed of that, or people that play RPG and tabletop games, whatever. I think the beauty of it is that nowadays you can find them easily. But on the other hand, it's easy for people that have fringe ideas, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I think having ideas that are different than the norm in and on itself is not a bad thing. But the problem becomes when they are, for instance, like alt-right ideas, like Nazis or things like that, or they infringe on somebody else's values. Things like I think that's a problem. I don't think that the cause, which is the internet and the ease of access of information, should be abolished or anything like that. It's just that's the reason why nowadays you see more and more conspiracy theories. For instance, just to bring it back, exactly what you said. Like, it's so much easier for you to find the people that believe the same thing as you, and as soon as you find somebody that believes the same as you, you're like, oh, I must be thinking something right. Look at this guy. All these people, like, there's like 50 other people that believe the same thing that I do. There must be something to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting the understanding of the way that language evolves anyway, because you were talking about it as like a belief system, but like the way, like, the two words that recently came up in conversations for me were the word decimate. So like how when you say something is decimated today, its literal meaning is you lost 1 in 10.
Yeah.
But everybody uses it a very different way, like it's you're completely obliterated, which is not the same.
Yeah.
And the other one, which I thought was really interesting, was the word technically. Technically means literally. It's not, the two words have the same meaning, but it's interesting that the way we use it these days is actually almost the opposite word of literally. When you say, well, they're technically married, it begs the question, well, what about it doesn't make what about this makes them not married? But it actually means literally. Like if you say they're technically married, it means they are literally married.
Okay,
But there's
a
hidden connotation. Yeah, go ahead.
Is that I think that the two things that, like, the word literally changed as well.
Yeah.
Not even joking, right? We used to, like, the word literally would means that in the literary form means it's 100% whatever it is that you're describing. Because it's literal, it's written, it's set in stone. But it's just a matter of languages being fluid, right? It just it changed the meaning. Nowadays, people use literally as an adjective.
Yeah.
That just means yeah, well, it is sometimes, it isn't sometimes. It got the complete opposite, like, meaning. The word theory is a great one, because people complain about calling the something a theory. Oh, gravity is just a theory. Climate change is just a theory, right?
But flat earthers love to like say that, but they don't understand scientific theory. So it's
it's the thing. Like, in science, the word has a different meaning than in colloquial form. The word literally in science has a different meaning than in colloquial form nowadays. And all these examples are like that. Yeah.
You know what I say all the time? I say it all the time. Is first of all, I say like all the time, and I fucking can't stop. It sucks. I write it. I write it in text chat. I don't know why. It's never in like my formal writing, but in my informal writing, in my informal speech, it's always there. I say like constantly. Anyway, I say to be honest all the time, and that really bothers me because that implies that I'm lying the rest of the time. But you don't really you don't really say it to mean that. I don't mean like as opposed to the rest of the time I am being honest now. It's just like, it's almost I use it as an emphasis. It's like, to be honest, I don't really like this. Like, but
It's almost like an apology. Do
yeah,
you realize that? And you're like, yeah, to be honest, I like anime. It's like,
yeah.
you apologize. It's like, yeah, you're honest. I like it. Like, I'm not apologizing, but it kind of feels like it. I never noticed until you mentioned right now. You're right.
I say if I'm
You
being
do.
honest all the time. I don't know
You
why,
do.
because I pretty much don't lie. I try to be as honest as I like, probably to a
I'm
fault.
jealous.
Probably to a
To
fault.
be
So
honest,
like,
I lie all the time.
yeah, HB is a fucking just a pathological. But it's so like, that's something that really bothers me. I think we do that as a society. I think there are just things. I have this this sort of like joke with my wife. It's this character. His name's Gord, and I always talk about my buddy Gord, and it's this like Canadian character. So it's like, oh yeah, I was over at the Costco talking to my buddy Gord, and he told me all these stories, bud. And it's just like I go into like Canadian mode, and that's shit that is like passed down from like generation to generation to generation of like Canadian stereotypes, and that's shit that like that is evolution of sort of language and themes and it's and you could say that there's probably a Brazilian equivalent to the Canadian sort of twang, just as there's a southern United States sort of stereotype. These kind of stereotyped groups are also sort of that same evolution of language, because the southern twang comes from an evolution of a part of Britain that settled there and also mixed with the Mexican natives, and sort of you get this sort of mix of sort of languages, and it's really interesting. I find that shit absolutely fascinating, and how that shit evolves. And maybe to try to get back on topic, that's how subcultures evolve.
I kind of have a question for you. Is that, as a Canadian, is that in any way, shape, or form, and for lack of a better word, because I don't know the English word, is that like slightly racist?
No,
Because here's the thing.
because people like that barely exist, but they do.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But isn't that the thing with bad stereotypes? That's like the
I think because it's like comes from a bunch of white people, nobody cares. To be perfectly honest,
kind of sad, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's very sad.
Like really, nobody. No, I haven't seen a single person who cares. Usually, like, because that's like my like I have family from Newfoundland, so like that's how they talk, and it's just, to me, it's just like, it's Gal says sometimes, my wife, his name is Gal. She says sometimes that I just sort of fall into it and I just speak like that, and it's like, well, damn, like that sucks. But because it's like, to me, it's like, I'd rather be a little bit more eloquent, but that is sort of, in a weird way, like my family. I have half my family is from Newfoundland, so it's like that's how people talk there. And you can ask. We have a mutual friend who's from Newfoundland, and there are people who just, it's just the affectation in their voice, but it is the traditionally like Canadian sort of accent, and maybe it is to. Maybe if it was like some random person, I think maybe I might be offended, but I guess because it's like how some of my family spoke, it's, to me, it's just like, it's really normal. And I used to work in like grocery stores in small town Ontario. People just talk like that. Like, it's just the way it is. And so,
but if I said something like that, you might be offended, because after all, I have like no connection to it. You lived it, you own it. You know what I mean?
It could be. Honestly, it could be.
If you said something about Brazilians being, like, I don't know, untrustworthy or lazy or whatever one of the stereotypes of Brazilians, right? Like, I would probably be offended. It was like, who the fuck are you?
But that's where the line could be drawn.
I can come, like, turn to my buddy that is Brazilian, and we can talk shit about Brazil all we want. And it's like, it's fine. We are fucking Brazilians. It's like, what are you gonna do? Yeah, I know.
What do you mean, you people?
Yeah.
Yeah, I it's really, I think it's really interesting. I think it might be similarly, like, I come from an Irish background. I'm sort of like pretty outspoken about that, but my great grandmother was going to be on the Titanic, actually.
Oh shit! Really?
But then she got really sick, and they wouldn't let her on. So,
Ooh,
which is like, and then like,
dodge that
and
bullet.
then the next year she was on
To
another
bring
boat.
it back to coronavirus, right?
To bring it back to coronavirus. And so like when people talk about like, I find like the leprechaun, like the sort of basis of the leprechaun sort of insulting, especially doing like a bunch of history. So like, but I'm not Irish. Like I'm not actually Irish. I have Irish ancestry and I have Scottish ancestry. So a lot of my ancestry comes from like the like ancient Celtic sort of tribes, right? That so I go back and back and back. But the leprechaun is actually a derogatory sort of character, but it's become sort of this weird icon. The
Really?
and so when I see that being sort of this like the only representation of like Ireland is like potatoes and leprechauns, it's kind of like there's so much
I
more
thought-
going on.
But also that guy from Braveheart.
That's he's Scottish, so that's kind of insulting. But
No, the king. It's my island.
oh yes, okay, yeah.
So I thought the leprechaun was just a mythological creature.
It is, but the leprechaun was developed by Saxons post Catholicism. The leprechaun is actually designed to diminish their Odin-like king god to nothing, so that their god seems better.
Oh, it's like the Catholics did with Tupa.
Yeah.
Like our main god in
Yes.
our native. They said like, oh, you have this big god called Tupa. Well, you know that he's the main god. He is God, and then they conflated with the Catholic God.
Yeah.
So it's like what the
Yeah.
Catholics did to your god, to all the
They did-
gods,
they
to
did
the,
to
to the
Christmas,
Celtic, to the pagan
did-
god.
To Easter, they did to everything.
Yeah, that's why those things
fucking
got
carnival in Brazil. Carnival is a fucking it's a pagan
pagan
tradition, right? It's like as pagan as can be. But then I was like, you know what? It should ends in like is Ash Wednesday? Is that what it's called? In English? I don't know in English.
That sounds correct.
Yeah, it ends on Ash Wednesday, so it's like all about like so it's yeah, man. We should have like a one whole podcast only on Catholicism.
Yeah, I'm like a real like anti-colonial sort of like
We know you're Warden.
Post-colonialism is a really interesting topic to me, and I wish that it wasn't so upsetting. But anyway, to kind of come around to that, you know, when you talk about Catholicism and you talk about the Crusades and the way that they like in a weird way, it was this crazy cult that got a lot of power. Because think about how they handled everything. That might be controversial for me to say, but truthfully, they went across the world and murdered people who didn't agree with them. So it's like, you know, to a certain degree,
To
when
be
you think
fair,
about it that way.
most religions did exactly the same.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
They said they were, if Catholics are nothing but efficient.
they took the best. They murdered the most.
Really good.
I think we just hear about them the most because we're Western. I think there's a decent
because
number.
they won.
No, they kind of
Because they won.
They fucking won. There's
Um,
nothing. Anyway, I think that on this high note, we should come to a close. If anybody has any questions for us that are non-Foxhole related in whatever the fuck we're rambling about, which has been like a very weird episode of this podcast.
I can honestly talk about this shit all day. Like this kind of stuff. When we talk
That's
about like
when we lose,
religions,
like-
and cults, and conspiracy theories, I
We
just find it
lost
so
like
fascinating.
60% of the United States population that is watching us because it's like we're shitting on something that they believe. Don't get
I
me
have a
wrong,
question for you, Matt.
I do
What's
I do
up?
have the truth that you get to believe on whatever you want to believe. So keep going.
As long as it's not hurting anybody else.
Going back
Exactly.
to your lettuce comment. if you were suddenly trapped on Mars, right? Like you woke up one morning, now you're on Mars, and you've got 2 habitation modules. One of them has lettuce in it, just a lot of lettuce, and the other one has a ton of kale. Which one do you live in?
You destroy both of them and plant potatoes.
Yeah, I was gonna say potatoes are better than both anyway. Lettuce is basically just like water. I'd probably go to kale because if I only had the one opportunity, kale is more nutritious than lettuce. And if I have to think
Damn
logically, I'm gonna probably make it into a paste and then like drink it.
You know there are ways you can cut and cook kale that are really tasty. And I don't like bitter things. There are ways. Yeah, there's a will, there's a way, my friend.
I mean, I'll have to take your word for it. I don't like it. It's like partially the texture. It's like this, like crunchy, like fucking weird, like.
See, but that is the reason. Okay, I gotta teach you the way to
You'll
cook
just
it
have
like
to make me
Brazilian
some kale
style.
one day. That's fine.
Yeah, I think I have to.
I'll do it.
It's really, really good.
You can just get me back for basically like burning your taste buds. That one time.
Oh yeah, that day.
I made
anyway.
I made ribs for HB, and it was the spiciest thing I've probably ever made. And I didn't know it was going to be so spicy, but HB hates spicy food, so it was.
Wait, what? You're Brazilian.
I cannot handle. So see, this is a bad stereotype. This is a bad stereotype. There's one region of Brazil that really likes spicy food, but that's not the whole of Brazil. No. Brazilians don't eat very spicy food. They put spice on their food way more than what I can handle, to be fair. But there's one region of Brazil, the northeast of Brazil, eats very, very spicy food. The rest of Brazil doesn't very much, to be honest.
Okay.
Man,
I'd love to go to Brazil.
To kind of talk, I actually, I was thinking about that as well. But, maybe when coronavirus is over.
Yeah, maybe then.
Yeah.
Maybe when Bolsonaro's not in power.
I was
That's
thinking.
a big one.
Yeah. I was thinking about this recently. I actually kind of want to go to Peru. Peru is a country I'm really interested in. But mostly for just geography. I think the geography is really fascinating there.
I would like to go there one day as well. Never been to Peru.
What you were talking about is really interesting because Brazil is such a big country. So the idea that there's like one kind of like cuisine is kind of silly. It's like when people say Chinese food. It's like, okay, but China's like one of the biggest countries geographically in the world, and they have like 1.3 billion people. So the fact that there's like this idea that there's like, oh, there's Chinese food. I actually recently had Northern Chinese food, and it's like really, really fucking good. It's like way
100% different,
it's
right?
1,000 times better than what you consider to be like sort of like Shanghai or Beijing sort of like basic sort of Chinese food.
Although I do like that food already.
I mean, I think I do too, but what has sort of translated into sort of American Chinese food, which is bleh. But Northern Chinese food is fucking fantastic. It's
really good.
There's so much like garlic in it. Actually, everything's really garlicky, and I think it's fascinating how these different cuisines can sort of exist. And so it's just like in Canada, actually, like the East Coast and the West Coast and the center of Canada are all different.
I'm gonna be racist here right now, so I'm just giving you a spoiler one.
I'm half Chinese. I need you to know this before you start.
No, I'm
you know what?
Canada,
you had your Brazil comment. He gets his China comment.
No. I'm racist against Canada. Don't worry, you both can get offended.
Great, that's fine.
I was going to say the reason why you didn't come across your mind is because Canada has terrible food because they learned from the British. And it's
yeah. You know what? I totally like. I love going to restaurants that have sort of an origin. When I went to Israel, let me tell you, my mind was blown. The food in the Mediterranean is so much fucking better than here. Like it is so astronomical. Good. Just like a simple coffee is like just a billion times better because they actually make it properly. I don't know. Okay. There's just anyway.
It's true what he said about like British food though, because it's just fucking
Lebanese people. Lebanese food is mind-blowing good. Like so fucking good. I'm not kidding. Like it became like the same way that in Toronto, like Thai food is everywhere. Lebanese food like exploded in Brazil. Like I don't know, 20 years ago, because it's so good. Like here's the thing that I think the Canadians unfortunately got from their British ancestry. They didn't learn how to fucking season shit.
Yeah, no, that's the problem. Like poutine's good, but it's fries and gravy and cheese. Like, it's like whatever. That's
controversial opinion. Gravy is good, but not amazing. Gravy is bland.
It's. I mean,
kind of bland.
It's also really different if you have like poutine like here versus like in Quebec. Quebec poutine is way better than it is here, and it's the same as like I don't believe I had a falafel until I went to Israel.
Oh my god,
it's just not the same. It's just literally not the same. Their water is different. The ingredients are different. There's like spices that you can't get here. It's just different.
You know my story with food in Canada, right? Like, because I come from Brazil, and particularly in the area that I'm from in Brazil, I grew up among the Japanese community. This is the reason why I'm a fucking weeaboo. It's not a choice. I actually grew up in the Japanese community.
We talked
All my
about this
friends were
before, and if you're not aware, Brazil has an enormous Japanese immigration.
Yeah.
Because
The
particularly in the
Japanese
area.
are ashamed of their weeaboo.
They're ashamed of me.
I actually hold on, HB. Before you continue, I have a question. I was wondering this last night because I was thinking about Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
Because I've just finished the remake, and there's something I'm just really curious about. Maybe you'll have an answer for me. How come in anime stuff,
Mhm.
people have to make a sound for every minor movement that they make? So if Max just waves at me, I have to wave back and go, nah. And like when you offend me, oh.
Okay,
do you know what I mean?
Okay, there's two reasons. Like in comics and uh, in comics and anime and writing as well, Japanese are very onomatopoeic. They like onomatopoeias, and the reason for that, and the reason behind of that, is that the language fosters this. The reason why the language fosters that, when I say onomatopoeia for the people to know, is that the word, it's like the sound that something makes. So, for instance, the sound of something clapping is paku 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 paku. The sound of
that's Pac-Man. That's why Pac-Man, because it's to open your mouth.
Exactly that. The sound of, for instance, I don't know, something electric is bidi bidi. So there are sounds for things. I don't know for sure. The way I imagine is because in Japanese culture, you think a lot before you talk. So you don't just like explode and like vomit words like we do in the West, which was what I'm doing right now. So what happens is that because people like interact in a slightly different way, and words have a lot of meaning. So people read, like they read meaning in a lot of what you say, the specific words and the way you say those words. Man, it's so complicated. For instance,
No, I know what you're saying.
The way you refer to somebody, the way you flex your verbs, the suffix that you put on the verbs refers to the way you are and the social standing. Because of that, the way you say something has a lot of meaning. So if you say something kind of like informal to your boss, that would be considered like a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, there's a lot of thought on what you say. Because there's a lot of thought on what you say, people are much more conservative and specific into how they say things. Not only that makes speaking slower, so you have to think about it. It's kind of like what I'm doing right now, that I'm like very carefully like choosing the words that I say. What you speak ends up being more stunted. But you don't want to have, first of all, you don't want to have silence. There's a lot of connective words that happen in Japanese. You can pretend to be very good in Japanese by doing a lot of connective, like eto, are, soto. You use these sounds to kind of like a buffer in a video in which you're thinking about exactly what you're going to say. Not only that, but you have to be very specific. The way that I think of it is that kind of like when you write something in a text, sometimes you try to make sure that your feelings are portrayed. So you put an emoji. It's kind of like a concise way to clearly express something. And the way I imagine, and this is my theory, I imagine that all these onomatopoeias came about because you want to try to clearly, specific, express a feeling, a situation, a sentiment, or something like that. So when you read the onomatopoeia, it's an onomatopoeia for silence. It's like literally they're trying to describe the sound of silence. But when you read that onomatopoeia, you know clearly what's going on. Nobody's talking, so there's an awkward silence. Everybody's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think
It
like
doesn't have a sound, but but that onomatopoeia expresses something, and that's why they got so used to using onomatopoeias.
I think like when things
That's
are
my
localized,
theory.
when things are localized, I just think it comes across to me as like, I think it almost works better. Like I'm not actually like able to understand the language, but I've watched things in Japanese with subtitles, and it kind of bothers me less. I don't know if it's like localizing it then in Western media. That's just not part of our storytelling grammar, right? So it comes across as like
Language.
cringy as fuck when it in something like that is supposed to be like a serious moment and everybody's like exclaiming somehow. It honestly really bugs me. But because it undercuts sort of like, maybe that's what I should have just played it in Japanese. Maybe it wouldn't have bothered me. I don't know. But it's things like that where
But
it's
that's
like,
because of the difference, right? I think that like there's an expectation of you to be more concise and explain exactly like Japanese people when they're talking to each other, particularly to each other, they're very circumspect about how they say things. For instance, let's give an example. Let's say you are throwing a party and you invite me. I could say, "Oh, that sounds lovely. I'll see if I have some time. I'll see if I can have some time to do it." That is most likely already considered a negative. Like you're saying you don't want to do it. And both of them know that. But it's a very circumspect way of phrasing it, so I don't hurt your feelings, and so many reasons. There's a lot of reasons, right? And I think onomatopoeias comes to that. Like it's a way of expressing your feelings without being direct. I think it just comes, particularly in written media, and it overtook when suddenly we, like, I don't know, 100 years ago we start getting like films and videos, and video games even closer. They're still bound to reading like the rules, the literacy rules, right? Or at least not rules, but like things they're used to.
Because it's still
As a
there.
Japanese audience.
It's still there to some degree. It's not quite as much, but in like Kurosawa films and stuff, that it's still there. Like if you go out and watch like Rashomon or something, like that sort of exclamation, that sort of like breathy, sort of just like, oh, like that's there. Even exactly, all the way back to these old like masterful like films. It's still. That's why I'm wondering. I know it's very clearly like a cultural thing, but it's like it's sometimes hard to stomach when you hear the words in English. I don't know what it is. Anyway, interesting.
It's funny because like I went to Japan and it's weird that to hear them actually do it, because they do that weird anime thing where like like that confused sound, or the emote what they're, and it's weird to hear it because to me I hear it and I think they must have got that from anime, but actually like art is probably imitating life. Yeah.
If you ever play Yakuza, there's not much like voice acting, but there is a lot of that. So like you'll talk to somebody that will go, "Oh no," and it's just like this like series of like sounds for every line that like indicates like an expression. And in that case, it worked because there's not actually dialogue for everything. But it's very strange because you're talking to like Yakuza guys who are supposed to be very serious, but they seem kind of goofy because of that. And it's a strange thing that is, I think, just culture shock. I think it's just really different culturally. Anyway.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. That's the reason why it's so. It just doesn't translate well. Like it's you saw how hard it was for me to even try to get like a glimpse of what it means. It's like I'm so used to it, and I studied it not only after the fact as well, to the point that like people used to comment like, "Oh, your Japanese is very fluent. It's not particularly like it's not correct, but it's fluent." And it was
That's
because my Japanese is just okay, right? Like my actual grammar and it's just okay. It's not amazing, but it's very fluent. Like like your conversation flows so naturally. It's like it doesn't flow naturally. It's just I learned how to use those words, those in between words, and it makes it sound like I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean?
My Japanese instructor had a very similar story. He's a white guy, but this was back in high school. He was a white guy, and he's like, I lived in Japan for 3 years. I learned how to speak the language pretty fluently, but it didn't matter how good he got at it. They would always come up to him and comment to him like, "Oh, you speak Japanese really well." And at the first, he relates to us like, "Oh, that was really like nice of them to come over and tell me that." But after like 2 years of this and them never letting up on it, he starts to feel like maybe they're just like just the idea that a white guy could speak fluent Japanese. It was almost condescending to get the.
It's because there's a lot of like you don't want to hurt their feelings. So that's a common joke about the people that study Japanese, is that the one that one phrase that you will hear no matter what, if you speak terrible Japanese to mediocre Japanese to slightly good Japanese, you hear the same sentence like "oh jozu ne," which means like "oh you're really good." Like there was if you don't look well Japanese, if you look like me, you're like you hear your Japanese is really good, and that's still like it became a fucking joke eventually because that's true. Like it has been. So when people told like, "Oh, your Japanese is fluent," I was like, "Oh, that's different. That's it's not the regular one. Like I know it's bad. I know it's kind of shitty." Anyway, I think we're going like way past our time.
Yeah, that's okay though. We should bring an end to it though. Probably at this point.
Okay, so thank you everybody that like joined us for this very rambling edition of Clapfoot After Dark.
Hey man, it was fun. Anytime you want to talk about conspiracy theories, fucking string aliens, and flat earthers,
we should
I'll
pick
be here.
Specific conspiracy theories to talk about. Why don't we do that? That would be really fun.
We usually
anyway.
So like for some Inside Baseball, we usually come in here and we like, what's the news that we want to talk about today? And then we write down a couple topics, and then usually we get to one of them. And we should maybe just stop trying to talk about news and be like, hey, what's an interesting topic that we'd like to talk about?
Yeah, we should just source it from people from the Clapfoot After Dark channel and just be like, what do you guys want to talk about?
Actually use the Clapfoot After Dark.
I'm gonna put a challenge. Yeah, I'm gonna put a challenge for not challenge, but like something for you guys to do that are still watching. Choose a topic for us to talk in the next one. Just choose a topic. And
put it in the Clapfoot After Dark channel so that it actually gets some use because it hasn't seen any use in a really long time.
Yes, you're right. So we're gonna monitor that channel, and then probably during like the day, put in the coconut, put it in the channel. I'm gonna forget. I'm like 100%.
This is gone in like 30 seconds.
Okay, so I have a memory of a goldfish. Just so you know, coconut. I really forget a lot about it's literally a medical condition. I forget a lot of shit. Put it in the channel. We will look into it and we'll try to remember and talk about it. If it's animals, that's awesome.
Also, we will post last week's tomorrow, right?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, okay. We'll say tomorrow, then you have to do it.
Fair enough. It's on me.
Got you.
So we join back here in 2 weeks. The next one is gonna be on May 13th. Is that correct? It happens every second Wednesday at 6 p.m. EST on Clapfoot, twitch.tv/Clapfoot, which is the Clapfoot Twitch, not the Foxhole one. Just be careful about that. We also supposedly archive these on YouTube, youtube.tv/Clapfoot as well.
We did lose you put one the topics. 2 weeks ago.
We did lose one, yeah, but you know it happens. We will monitor the topics on discord.gg/Foxhole game. Foxhole. Shit, man.
Discord.gg/Foxhole, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And other than that, where they can find more about you, Max?
You can find me on the Discord. I'm at the very top under contacts, or you can find me on Twitter at max_KFC, although I don't use.
Cool. You got cut out in the end, but that's fine. What about you, Matt?
You can find me at northernpixels_ on all your social media applications.
And then you can find me. Oh,
Go ahead.
So I can find you on Tumblr, is what you're saying.
No, Tumblr sucks. I deleted my Tumblr.
You can find me though on Instagram, at HB the Paper Mage, or the easiest one is Twitter, which is at HB, but spelled AGEB like an old decrepit B. Other than that, the last thing we have to say at this time of night when we're moving away from the computer is what, Matt?
Stay sexy.